Once again, time for Santanatam. If there's any questions in the room, this will all be in English today.
กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์ครับ I would like to ask how to start the Metta Pavana. Metta Pavana. Yeah, and if you use it as the start of the meditation to create pramod, and then after we can do better meditation or any, and can you tell in step by step? Thank you.
Well, there are many different ways of cultivating metta. One of the methods is to bring to mind some person or some animal that you have a great deal of natural affection for. So there's something that is very, very dear, naturally very dear to you. And so bringing the image of that person to mind, and then bringing the attention very deliberately down to your heart, the Jitjai, and so in a way then kind of forgetting that person and bringing the attention to that feeling. So in that moment, here is the feeling of friendliness. Here is the feeling of well-wishing, of affection, of kindness. And so with metta practice, I feel it's most important to know that feeling, the arom, the actual emotion of kindness and well-wishing, benevolence, because metta is just a word. It's a word referring to a quality, and so sometimes with metta bhavana we can get lost in all the words and forget the actual quality, the arom, the attitude of the heart. So getting a feeling for that quality of loving kindness, that kind of warmth in the heart. And then one method that I found that's quite helpful, and again it's kind of connected with that both the sort of the receptive and expressive side of metta, is to then establishing that feeling within the heart, to then combine that with anapanasati. So, but feeling the breath right in your chest rather than in your nostrils, but feeling the rhythm of the breathing right at your heart. And then with the in-breath to take that warm feeling and to fill your own body with that. And you can use words like, may I be well, or may I be at ease. And then as you breathe out, may all beings be well, may all beings be at ease. Or you can say, may I be at peace, or may all beings be at peace. You choose your own words. And so then you're establishing these sort of basic elements of the practice of, one, the genuine feeling of well-wishing, of metta, and then also staying focused. So that I found that's is a helpful way of establishing that attitude. And also because of connecting with anapanasati, there's the quality of focus and not getting lost in too many details about who you're spreading metta to, how far and so on. So that's one method that I found very, very helpful. And then to say, give if you're particularly interested to develop metta as a practice, then giving that a good amount of time, 20 minutes or half an hour at the beginning of the sitting. So it's really fully established. I was with with Lumpur Sameto on a 2-week-long retreat he was leading once in America, and this was inside a monastery, And I think people were expecting Luang Por Sumedho to give lots of very kind of high wisdom teachings or special kind of practices. For the first 5 days, it was just this practice. May I be at peace. May all beings be at peace. May I be at peace. May all beings be at peace. And you can almost feel like people think, when is he going to get onto the, the high Dhamma? When is he going to get onto the profound practice? But it was really very, very skillful, very simple, very straightforward, and helped really ground the whole group in that attitude of kindness. And then after 5 days, then he started teaching more in terms of vipassana and giving more of the kind of wisdom teachings. But for 5 days, it was just, may I be at peace, may all beings be at peace, may I be well, may all beings be well. And so it was, you really thought, this is the only tune playing on the radio. This is all there is. So okay, just go with it. And it had a very, very wonderful effect. So there was a question, both of you raised your hands together. So
Ajahn, why did you decide to become a pakao? Were there any particular instances that inspired you to do so? And subsequently, how did your parents react after you ordained? Did they visit Wat Papong? And throughout the years, was there any moment in time when you felt like disrobing?
There's a few questions there. Well, I was 21 when I walked into Wat Pah Nanachat. I'd left England just after my 21st birthday. I graduated from university in June, had my 21st birthday in September, September the 2nd, and then got on the plane September the 7th. And then I walked into Wat Pah Nanachat January the 8th. So I was 21 years old. My parents, they knew I was a bit eccentric. My sisters are very conservative, kind of ordinary middle-class English women, very, very modest, very conventional. I was a bit of a wild character, so it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and the kind of people that I brought home, friends and people I brought back from the pub with me, or people I invited over for the weekend. Lots of colorful characters. I remember one evening after one session at the pub, a group of people from the local art college had come back to our place. And my father, we had a very narrow little staircase in this old farmhouse we had. It was built in the 15th century. Little twisty staircase. My father was going up the staircase from his office, coming down the staircase from the bathroom with one of my art student friends, and he had a leopard skin jacket, had long red ringlets, his hair, and PVC, bright red PVC trousers. And they met on the staircase, and I could almost hear my dad going, "I'm not sure what this is, but whether this is from whether this being is from this planet or not, but he's one of my boy's friends." Okay, just ignore and walk past. So they knew I was eccentric, and even going off to study psychology in university was pretty weird for rural English community I grew up in. So they were prepared for me to do something kind of exotic, and people had different ideas about what I could do or should do with my life. And my father was a dog expert, and his particular breed he was specialized in was bull terriers. And in the 1930s, he'd worked managing the kennels for a very wealthy man called Raymond Oppenheimer, who was part of the De Beers Diamond Corporation. So Raymond didn't have to work, he just collected the money. And my father looked after his bull terrier kennels. So Raymond wasn't a particularly religious person, but when I was born, then he asked Raymond to be my godfather, to connect me to some money. And Raymond's business partner, Eva Wetherell, was the godmother of one of my other sisters. So they were good friends. It wasn't completely commercial. But there was this deal that if I got a university degree, my godfather would open the doors at De Beers Diamonds. And at that time, De Beers controlled 9 out of every 10 diamonds in the world. So it was a guaranteed lucrative career. But I was not interested in, I was kind of playing with the idea. I liked advertising, I liked artwork, and I was studying psychology. So I was toying with the idea of going into advertising and using kind of art and creativity and psychology in that field. And then I had an insight on a bus in London. And I don't know if any of you are living in London in the 1970s, but there was an advertisement for diamonds. And it was a big billboard poster. And I was on the top story of a bus going around the big roundabout at the Elephant and Castle, if any of you know that. And on this poster, there was a woman's chin and to the top of her chest, and a very elegant lady's neck with a black ribbon around her neck, and this very, very beautiful diamond brooch pinned to this choker. And the caption was, "Isn't it about time you bought your wife a diamond before somebody else does?" So I thought, I was a pretty liberal kind of a person, but I thought, that is evil. Do I really want to? And then just in the corner of the poster, De Beers, you know, they didn't have to announce themselves. Basically, if it was a diamond, De Beers owned it. So they didn't even have to really put their name on the advert. Like Rolls-Royce, you don't see adverts for Rolls-Royce cars because they sell everything they can make. Anyway, so I thought, okay, that's diamonds out the door. So all kinds of things I could have done in academic fields, carrying on at the university, where I was interested to go into acting. Had a few friends who were drama students, and I like the theater. I used to act a lot when I was a school kid. But none of these seemed, whenever I thought about any of those as a career, I go, yeah, really? You know, how many wise old actors do you meet? Not many, usually alcoholic and egotistical. Yeah. And then the business world, okay, you can have lots and lots of money and you can have beautiful places to live, but really, so what? So not to go into too much detail, but about 5 or 6 times during my teens, from when I was about 13 to when I was 21, I've been in situations that were absolutely like picture book perfect. It's like just like on the cover of the chocolate box, like absolutely flawless, beautiful environment, lovely day, beautiful people, perfect situation. And I was miserable. And this had in different places with different groups of people. And this had happened 5 or 6 times. It's like, everything is perfect. Why am I not happy? And so by the time that happened about the 5th or 6th time, it's like, I can't get away from this. And it was really clear that if your mind is not happy, it doesn't matter how much money you've got, how many degrees you've got, how famous an actor you are, whether you've written a great novel, you know, you've got a beautiful cottage in the country with a lovely wife and 12 kids running around the garden, it doesn't matter. And that was like absolutely clear to me by the time I was 21. I don't know why, but that was kind of inescapable. Well, I tried to escape it by drinking, but that was the thing. Like, you've got to do something about your mind, and a psychology degree did not do it. With all respect to any psychologists present here, that academic psychology did not answer that question. So when I left England, then it was with, the only thing that seems meaningful and interesting is spirituality. And the spirituality that comes out of Asia seems far more meaningful and realistic than sort of Judeo-Christian spirituality in Europe. So when I walked into Wat Nanachat, it was sort of with all of that behind me, and that so no other kind of career was remotely interesting. Spirituality was the only thing that seemed meaningful, and I was looking for a way to change my mind in a radical fashion. So the ingredients were all there, and so when I walked into Wat Nanachat in January of '78, it was like, wow, this is exactly what I was looking for. It's called Buddhism. Okay, well, it's pretty close to some, you know, a lot of the ideas I've been trying to figure out myself growing up since I was about 10 or 11. And not only has somebody thought it all out before, but they've done it 10,000 times better than I could. And there's a whole community of people who want to come along and feed you every day, so you can do this. And they feel honored and happy that they can feed you every day for nothing. So, wow, this is too good to be true. So that's the background to why it was like, hey, this is perfect. I didn't like rules, and I didn't like organized religion. I was a kind of hippie anarchist. So philosophically, I object to all these rules. So I don't believe in organized religion. But there, in a place with lots of rules and very old organized religion, those kind of protests sort of went off like the noise of the crickets in the forest, just sort of went off into the background. And the reality, the actuality of what I met was far more impactful, far more meaningful. So I couldn't believe my luck. I thought, this is amazing. This is exactly what I was looking for. So it literally never crossed my mind to think, oh, well, I'll learn some Buddhism here, and then I'll go back to England and have a life. It literally, it never occurred to me to be a lay Buddhist. Like, well, if this is available and you can do this the rest of your life, great. So I realized later on that not everybody thought that way. But to me, it literally did not cross my mind to think I could, you know, live as a lay Buddhist. Like, well, why would you bother? You have to make money and kind of and do all of that other stuff where you can live really simply, close to the earth, and with all these really good people, and get free lunch every day. This is, you know, you'd be crazy to walk away from this. So that was my pattern of thinking. And then, as other Western travelers came along, I kind of naively assumed that they would think the same way. And then they'd, after a week or two, they'd go off back to the beach, and I go, where are you going? Like and I remember saying to one of the monks, I was like, you know, this place is incredible. It's amazing. I mean, where's everyone going to stay? Where once word gets out, you know, there'll be the queue all the way down the road to Warin. And I remember this monk here called Aranyapo, who'd already disrobed and come back once or twice and had a lot of suffering as a monk. He kind of gave me this look that went on for about 15 miles. And I don't think it'll be a problem. There won't be much of a queue. And so, but you know, this is incredible. This is amazing. This is wonderful. Of course, everybody in the world will think this is the most perfect thing. This is, I think not everybody's going to see it that way. So, and it was right. There wasn't a queue all the way down to Warin. Yeah. So, after about 2 or 3 weeks of being there, to sort of follow up about what my parents had, you know, what my parents thought. So, you know, I was 21. I'm the youngest child, the only son in the family, and I was naively ignorant of the kind of expectations they had. They had said, once you're 21, you can make your own choices. You can do whatever you like. So I thought, okay, great. It's up to me. So, but I had this feeling that I remember I was sweeping the pathway outside the front of my kuti, and I thought, yeah, my parents, they're very conservative, ordinary English middle-class people. They were both the youngest children of older parents. My mother was born in 1920. My father was born in 1913. his parents were born in 1863 and 1875. My mother's parents were born in 1879 and 1892. They're from a completely different era when Britain ruled the world, had the British Empire covered the world in red. Me going off to become a Buddhist monk in the forest in Thailand, that is so weird. It's such a contrast to their ordinary conservative Edwardian Victorian upbringing that they're never going to understand this. It was a kind of interesting moment because as I was standing there with a broom, I thought, maybe the kindest thing I can do for my family is to go back to England, find a nice girl to get married to, produce curly-haired children who have good table manners, speak with proper English accents, and get good marks at school, and that'll be, and they can run around the garden, and my parents can give them chocolate bars on their birthdays, and then it was like almost like hearing a voice in my ear that just said that would be an unkindness to your family. I mean, unkindness to anybody that you married and you're a parent of, and it'd be an unkindness to yourself. It was really like this extraordinarily clear thought, and it almost kind of stopped in my tracks. It wasn't like a kind of Deva talking to me, but it was this very, very clear thought, and it took shape in a single moment. Like, I would be performing this role of being a nice middle-class English bloke, but I really wouldn't care. I wouldn't care about the work. I wouldn't really care about the people I was married to or parent of. I would just be performing a role. I can act, but there was this really clear sense of that's a horrible thing to do to people. And in that same moment, it became clear, if you just act from a place of sincerity, then sooner or later they will understand. You're not doing this in order to cause them grief, but they'll be unhappy about it, but you're not doing it in order to make them unhappy. So just trust that you're doing it for a good reason and in a sincere way, and then sooner or later they will appreciate that. And so I decided to act on that. And so I realized I better break this slowly. So in those days, we would send aerograms, the kind of the thin blue fold-up letters. And so, oh, by the way, I'm staying in this Buddhist monastery. 6 weeks later, oh, by the way, I've shaved my head and I'm a pakao. I did a little drawing, a cartoon of myself. I used to have thick curly hair, so no one ever saw my ears. It was kind of buried under this bush of hair and a beard, and so then I tried to break it gently, but it was pretty stressful, because also this was in 1978, so Laos had fallen communist, Cambodia had fallen to the communists. You look at Ubon on the map, it doesn't give your mother a lot of ease of heart. My only son is joined some religious group that I don't know anything about in some weird corner of the world. It's a war zone. We could hear the big guns going across the river, from Nanachat. So even though I tried to break it gently, it was stressful. And again, it was completely outside the scope of anything that they would have expected for me. They knew that I was a bit of an extrovert character, but they didn't think in terms of rules and religion. They were more thinking I was going to get arrested or leave a string of fatherless children around the world. And so when I was in kindergarten, apparently my headmistress, Mrs. Waller, said to my mother, he'll either end up as prime minister or in Pentonville jail. She didn't come up with Buddhist monk, but even at the age of 3 or 4, I was a bit extreme. So anyway, I tried to break it gently, but then it helped that I came back to England after a couple of years. My father had a heart attack, and so I came back after my first reigns as a monk. And it also helped that Chithurst Monastery had just opened up. My parents lived in Kent. Chithurst is in Sussex, the next county over. So I could visit my family and then stay at Chithurst. It took about 15 years. Buddhism is that thing which is bad and wrong and took our son away from us. So that was the kind of fixed view. But it was after I started to get kind of worldly achievements, like going to conferences with the Dalai Lama or writing books and such like, then that was, I realized that, oh, they need something to be proud of. And when I walked on a Tudong walk from Chithurst Monastery in the south all the way up to the Scottish border, then I called my parents from Manchester halfway along, and there was this kind of pride and excitement in their voices. Oh, this is unique. No one's ever done this before. Our boy is kind of walking the length of England as a Buddhist monk. I'm like, oh. So I thought, duh, they need something to be proud of, because now it's like, well, what are your family up to? Oh, my one daughter works in the British Embassy in Moscow. The other daughter, she's a nurse in Great Ormond Street Hospital, Children's Hospital. My son is small village, rural community is kind of tough. But then my son is walking the length of England. Just that. So yeah, it took 15 years really to find some kind of a place where it fitted. And they were continually waiting for me to see sense and disrobe and get married and do the conventional thing. And then by the time my sisters had reached about 40, I was a Buddhist monk and making no noises whatsoever about ever leaving. Neither of my sisters were married. One was a diplomat in a Russian expert in the British Embassy in Moscow. The other one was a children's nurse, and I was a Buddhist monk. And they thought, okay, all of our expectations about family and grandchildren, it's all gone. Okay, let's just change the program. So this kind of happened on its own. They sort of gave up on all of us. And then one of my sisters actually did get married, but didn't have any children. So it's a long, slow process, but particularly in times of crisis, then it would be my role as a Buddhist monk or as a spiritual teacher would be useful for about 3 days. And then when there was a death in the family or some kind of major problem, then meditation, peacefulness, spiritual questions, they would become meaningful for about 3 days. And then after the third day, it's like, what do you want for breakfast? What's on the telly? And back to the usual. So the last part of your question was? No. I've thought of doing things that monks are not allowed to do. Which that's standard operating procedure, I would think. Others will not argue with that. It's kind of ordinary, but no, it's like again, because of those insights I had really as a teenager, that the mind is the most important thing, and that living in a monastery, living as a monk, living a celibate life, it's as simple as can be. And if you living in the commercial world, living with romantic relationships and responsibilities, not being critical of anyone, but it makes things more complicated generally. And so why would you make it more complicated when it's challenging enough already? I mean, I'm not arriving at it as just as a logical process, but yeah, it's lay life has never attracted me one bit, and so I realize that again, I'm not it's not that common to have that kind of certainty or that single-mindedness, but that's how it's been for me. So it's a long answer, but I could go on. But me, talking about the Attavada, but to me, the monastic life and the way of the Buddha was set up to be the maximally supportive conditions for mindfulness. And the more mindful you are, then the easier it is to wake up. And so it seems, well, the conditions of a monastery, like a retreat like this, it's structured completely to support mindfulness. And the more mindful you are, the less you suffer. So, QED, as they say.
I had a completely different question, but since you've just spoken to it, I was reflecting on, like, is it because the matrix is so compelling? Like when we go back into the world, like it just is so easy to practice here. And I just feel very present and this is so important. And then we go back into the matrix and everything's supported about, you know, a different way of life. So I'm thinking of you as like Morpheus. You have seen that, the movie, The Matrix?
Yes, yes. Very familiar.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure of my question, but it's much harder for me to be clear when I'm in the matrix at home. And here it's like it's totally the most important thing I could do. And then I'll start throwing dust in my eyes as I leave.
Well, I'm not sure what the question is. Again, it never occurred to me to try and live as a lay Buddhist, and I never did. I mean, I was a layman living at Wat Pah Nanachat for 3 weeks before I became a Pakao and Anagarika. So that's my experience of lay practice. I never attempted to hold down a job or have a relationship with anybody or use money in Buddhist practice. So I don't really have any direct experience of what it's like in that particular zone of the matrix. But I feel that, you know, we make our own decisions. We each have our own living situations and responsibilities. So doing the best we can to at least structure things to be as simple as possible, to not be creating extra complications. Then there's some moment by moment decisions that we can make to help our life to be uncomplicated and support that quality of mindfulness and the conditions that conduce to liberation. But so the I'm not sure what your question was, if there was much of a question.
I have a different question, but unless someone else has a question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So this was my original question. Reflecting on the practice, the guidance from this morning, working with a bit of a people problem, sometimes some people problem. And so working on it, noticing, I was thinking of it like, for some reason it came in like Tonglen, taking and giving, but in the opposite. So taking on too much from people and maybe giving, for example, or getting what I don't want, not getting what I want from people. And then I was, you know, you mentioned it yesterday in the interview about working with the reactivity in the body. So I felt tight chest and I have, you know, done this many times over, but really felt like it's right here. It's heavy. There's a sense of unworthiness there. And then bringing in a bit of a mantra, like no one can take away your wholeness or your centeredness. No one can give you that centeredness or wholeness. And then what you said the other night, awareness is the solid ground. Serenity is the final word. So could you speak to that process? And then maybe there's the advanced practice of self-view in there somewhere. So
there's a few different things in there. With respect to taking on too much from other people, that's very familiar territory for me, personality-wise. I would be always drawn into, well, not always, but very regularly drawn into taking responsibility for other people's problems and their suffering, and that people would sort of spill out their issues and I would make them mine and feel it was my job to make them happy. And if they weren't happy, I was failing. And so I did that a lot through my my life. And so I suffered a great deal. I was a very tearful child. So I felt very strongly a kind of overdid the compassion side. One of the family stories, I don't have any memory of this, but when me and my sisters were quite small, there was a TV show on a little black and white TV of Heidi, and my mother recounts how she came in, and then all three of us were sitting watching the television, and my sisters are kind of sort of glued to the screen with sort of interested and smiling expressions, and I was sitting there with tears pouring down my face. Oh, funny boy, you know. He's the boy. He's supposed to be the kind of rough and tumble type, and the girls are supposed to be the compassionate, sensitive ones. But I was just pouring with tears over this tragic situation of the sick girl on the mountainside. So it took me a long time to not be drawn into other people's issues. And I often quote a particular dialogue I had when it was such a strong habit, I didn't even realize that I did it that much. It was just kind of how life was. But I was at a novice at Wat Pah Nanachat, and very, very few of the Thai people who came to visit spoke any English at all. In the Isan, Northeast, most people didn't learn any English. On one occasion, we tidied up after the mealtime. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was the only person around in the sala, in the meeting hall. And this fellow came along from a different province, and he was a military officer, and he had heard about Wat Pah Nanachat and wanted to visit. And so I was a junior person, but I was the only one around. So we started chatting, and he spoke pretty good English. So I was talking about the place and discussing about Buddhism, and we got onto the subject of compassion. And I said, well, when I'm talking with people or I'm looking at situations, I always feel it's like it's my responsibility to make people feel all right, or to fix things. And if people are still unhappy, then I take it as my fault. And so, you know, I'm always suffering on account of other people's suffering. And he gave me this look like, well, that's not how Buddhists practice compassion. And I thought, oh, really? And he said, yeah. So because then, you know, if you're suffering on account of their problems, then you got two people suffering instead of just one. And he said, no. And I thought, well, I felt like, well, that sounds a bit hard-hearted. And he said, well, no, I know that I do what I can to help others. And I know that if I could do more, I would do more. But I know there's also a limit to my capacity. It's not that I don't care. It's not that I'm not involved. But there's a limit to what I can do. There's a limit to the effect I can have. So why should I create suffering in myself about something that I can't do? Wow. It just had literally never crossed my mind to think of it in that way. and that sense of, I trust, yeah, I'm a good-hearted person. If I could do more, I would do more. And it was so clear that it was just speaking his own truth, and that that was a strange Dhamma lesson to get from a military person. But that was really stuck with me. I thought, wow, that's a whole different way of relating to compassion and caring. And so it took a long, long time, having heard that and just sort of slowly trying to introduce that, to really work from that basis in terms of talking with other people. And when you're with someone and they're very upset, or they're tearful, or some tragic situation in their life, their partner is dying, or there's a crisis in their world, to really know, I do care, I care a lot, but I can't take the suffering away from this person. I can offer some advice, I can listen, but I can't take their pain away from them. If I could, I would, but this is the limit of what I can do. And then even when people will say, you got to help me, it's up to you to help me, to be able to say, well, that's your thought. You're completely welcome to have that expectation, but that's beyond what I can do. You choose your words carefully, but and also in the position of being a spiritual guide and in the role of teaching, then you're kind of asking to be it's understandable people expect you to have all the answers and to be able to fix everything, but to be able to recognize, no, I can only do so much, and beyond that, it's out of my capacity. I can lift a 100-pound rock, but I can't lift a 200-pound rock. It's more than I can do. And so that it takes a lot of real sati, kind of a conversation, and also body awareness of how you're sort of being drawn into somebody else's mood, and oftentimes, particularly giving advice or in that kind of counseling situation, just consciously relaxing as I'm listening to someone, and physically just breathing out, relaxing. And so you're attuning to what's being said, but you're not being drawn in. And even when people would say that kind of demand that you see it from their perspective, that if you cared about me, you'd be as upset as I am, and to be able to find the words to say no, that I do care about you, and no, I'm not upset, or you should be angry about this like I am, otherwise you're siding with the opposition, or you don't care. If you cared, you'd be angry like me. And to again not be drawn in, but to very respectfully be able to say, okay, that's your perspective, but I feel I do care and I am concerned, but I don't feel angry or upset in the same way. It's not out of disrespect for you, but I don't. That's not what I feel. And it's interesting, if there's a physical relaxation and a real sati, a mindfulness and sampajanya for the situation, the best words come. The words that fit the situation, even if the words are, I don't know what to say. And sometimes that's the best thing. I have no answer for you. I don't know what to say. And if you're coming from a sincere place, it's like, oh, well, yeah, thank you. I was asking too much. Sorry. So that's a few things about being drawn into people's moods and expectations. But mindfulness of the body is extraordinarily helpful in that. Was there another piece? Yeah. Pat.
At first I was going to ask about fixed view only, but now also more about metta. The fixed view, so we should try to offer our opinion unless asked, because you don't want to cause conflict, because you have opinions. You just
No, it's I wouldn't say so. I think it's totally okay if it's presented as it looks this way from my perspective, and you can create that kind of a introduction. Like this might sound very different from what you were saying, but from my perspective or my experience has been X, Y, Z. So it's totally okay to express opinions, but giving it a framework rather than this is actually the truth. You know, you're wrong, and what I'm telling you, words like actually are dangerous. But just to say, to speak sincerely and from your own perspective and say, well, that's really interesting. I didn't see it that way before, because looking at this situation, you know, what came to my mind was, you know, X, Y, Z. And so then you're presenting your point of view, but it's not an attack. You're not putting the other person down. It's respectful, genuine, and kindly. So we shouldn't be afraid of having opinions, but also recognizing that they are just opinions.
Also about metta, I was told by quite a few Ajahn, you cannot send loving kindness to people who died. And yet, I also was told when you die, you reborn immediately. So why can't we just kind of send loving kindness to them in their next life? That's one thing. And also you seem to like send to all of them, but is it better than specifically reciting each one in your life?
There's a few things there. Firstly, I don't know where this idea that you shouldn't send metta to people who've died has come from. It's totally weird to me. I don't know where that comes from. It's certainly not. It's not in the Pali Canon, and none of the teachers that I have ever had have ever encouraged that. So I really don't know where that comes from. I know I've heard people talk about that and say, "Oh, the teacher said you shouldn't do this." Why? That's kind of crazy to me. So all beings without distinction, whether they're in this human world at the moment, or they're in some intermediary state, or they're in some other realm, wherever, whatever, all beings. You can use the microphone, then people can hear you.
If they die, you can send like merit to them, but not metta.
I really don't understand where that comes from. It seems a very weird idea. With all due respect to whichever Ajahns said that, like, doesn't make sense to me. Or may all beings be happy except for this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Like, it's ridiculous. And people are dying every day. You know, millions of people die every day. And so why should they not be receiving the loving kindness of others? Like, so it's kind of weird to me. I really don't know what the logic is behind that. So I wouldn't go along with that as a principle. And also, yeah, in terms of the teachings about rebirth, it can be that one life comes to an end and another life begins immediately, but there can also be what they call intermediary states, sometimes for a long time, called the antarabhava. It's a Pali word. So there can be a gap where like when the Buddha was talking to Vacchagotta, and Vacchagotta says, what is it that sustains a being when one life has come to an end and before the next life begins? The Buddha says, tanupadana, craving is the fuel that sustains a being. And that antarabhava, it can be a long time, it can be years. Time is elastic in these different dimensions, they say. So and there was a third question.
Well, individual names. When
Yeah, you can do. I mean, like when we do Parita chanting or dedicating blessings, sharing of merit at Amaravati, is virtually every single day at Anumodana time. We're reading out the names of people who passed away, people making offerings, dedicating the punya for various relatives and friends, or for people taking, the kids taking their school exams, or people who passed away, or people who are going into hospital. So yeah, dedicating blessings and sharing merit or offering loving kindness to people, whether they're in the human world, whether they are have passed on into another realm or been reborn, then certainly you can dedicate blessings and share punya with particular people. I mean, literally, it's every single day at Amaravati. It's very, very rare that we don't read out somebody's name at the morning chanting, or usually the evening chanting, or the mealtime, the Anumodana, dedicating blessings every day almost. And I do feel that's useful. It's because with these kind of things, you are creating a psychological connection of some kind, and geography doesn't really matter. The mind doesn't start one place and stop some other place. It's your minds are connected. So spreading loving kindness, sharing blessings. Geography doesn't matter. Anywhere in the world is okay. No postal rates concerns. Yes, at the back there.
Namaskar, P'ra Ajahn, จ้าค่ะ. I have a question concerning about the book Ubekha, in one of the topic about inner voice, which it said that it could create the quality of meditation, but at the same time, if you concentrate too much, it might obstruct the quality of the meditation. And you said about the nada yoga, nata yoga. So if one have the inner voice.
You mean inner voice or inner sound?
Inner sound. It's
yes,
a book,
yes,
maybe,
yes,
sorry.
yeah.
Inner sound.
Yeah.
And if one have the inner sound, which is the techniques for nada yoga, or how can we improve the quality of meditation, if we hear the inner voice, inner sound. Yes, sorry.
Inner voice sounds like you're getting messages from somewhere else.
Sorry. Inner sound. It's
it's
in the book.
Yes, I was considering talking about this tomorrow, actually, in the meditation guidance. So it's a particular meditation method that it's been used by different spiritual traditions over many, many years. Luang Por Sumedho discovered it on his own. And it's a little bit more challenging in an environment like this, where you got the wonderful and beloved air conditioning machines, and also the crickets going in the background, because what's called the nada, or the inner sound, is like a continuous inner sort of ringing tone. It sounds very like crickets in the forest. So if I pay attention, I can hear the inner sound, as well as the purring of the aircon and the other forest sounds around us, but it's quite similar. And so for most people, if you turn the attention towards the hearing, you can notice this continuous inner vibration going along in the background, rather like white noise from the speaker. If the speaker is turned on and no one is talking through it, a kind of subtle, continuous, sort of silvery sound. So you can use that as a meditation object. And Luang Por Sumedho, he first started to use it after he'd left Thailand and he was living in London. He'd been in Thailand for about 10 years, but because of the noise of the forest, he hadn't really heard it. But in London, in those days, it was the kind of city that would shut down at about 11 o'clock at night. So if you're sitting meditating late at night, the town is very, very quiet. And he began to notice there was this continuous inner sound going on in the background of his hearing. And he's quite a creative and sort of experimental teacher. So he started to think, yeah, well, maybe you could use this as a meditation object. And he realized that he couldn't just hear it in the meditation, in the vihara, but also out in the park or out on the street. Other sounds could be there, but you could still hear it. So over a couple of years, he experimented with it and saw, okay, how you could use it. You could concentrate on it to the exclusion of other things, or you could just let it be a background to other perceptions. And so then after Chithurst Monastery opened, and we had the first retreats there in about 1980 or 81, he started teaching it to the community as a particular meditation method. So I found it was very, very helpful. It's a good kind of alternative to mindfulness of breathing, particularly if the mind gets very, very quiet and everything calms down, the breath can get very, very slow, or you just have very few breaths per minute, or long spaces between the breaths, whereas the inner sound is very continuous. And it has many attributes that are also very helpful in terms of meditation. You can't change it according to your own will. So like the breath, you can choose to breathe in or breathe out. You can make a long breath or a short breath. You can't kind of do anything with nada. It's you either pay attention to it or you don't. You can't make it change. You can't sort of make it stop or start. It's always there. So that absence of personal control is helpful. Also, that kind of continuity is that ever presence is almost symbolic of the Dhamma itself, apparent here and now, timeless, encouraging investigation. It's a sense object, but it has these attributes that echo some of the qualities of Dhamma itself. And so I feel it's very helpful in that respect. You can use it for concentration, to deliberately sort of focus on that and shut everything else out. So you can use it to strengthen samatha, concentration. And if you do, then the more you pay attention to it, the louder it gets, or the clearer, or the more sort of layers of sound you can hear within it, different frequencies. And also there's an effect whereby the more you concentrate on it, the brighter the mind becomes. So it becomes easier to concentrate. Whereas for some people, the more you focus on the breath, the more the mind inclines towards sleepiness. So the nada works in the opposite direction, so that it makes the mind very, very bright. And so sometimes it can be too bright, so that you're lying there in bed at 1:30 in the morning, like, well, I'm awake. My mind is very bright, though I was feeling a bit tired, but it's the power, the power is turned on. So it's it can be. So if you concentrate on it too much, it can be over-energizing. Like we were talking about piti and the qualities of prana, the energy in the body. So it seems to be in some ways connected to that prana system, chi, the kind of body energies. Different traditions talk about it in different ways. Within the yogic tradition, hatha yoga, then they have sort of various ways that they talk about that energy connected to the different chakras. In the Sikh tradition, they talk about it as the yoga of inner light and sound. And they have various different spiritual traditions have talked about it in different ways. So In the Vedic tradition, it's also called the Brahmanada, the divine sound. So the encouragement that Luang Por Sumedho would always give is like, don't write a big story about it. Don't think that because you can hear this sound that somehow means you're close to enlightenment. It's just a sound. It doesn't have to have a huge amount of spiritual significance, but it can be. Even though some traditions do talk about it in very elevated ways, like Brahmanada, the divine sound, or the such like. It's best to sort of say, well, it's a sound, and physiologically, people can say, well, it's just the residual firing of the nervous system. Well, whatever it is, you can hear it. Yeah, and sometimes it's for people who have had a different kind of discipline, like if you're a yoga practitioner and developed a lot of body awareness, or if you're a dancer, then you might feel it more as a physical sensation rather than hearing it as a sound. So it's not always in this hearing realm, but it's a continuous vibration that can be noticed. So then, so it can be used as a support for concentration, but also as a support for insight. So just like right now, I can hear it as I'm talking to you, and it's there in the background, so that if you develop it as a kind of backdrop to experience, so then it helps the mind to remember, oh, this is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, arising and passing away. It's like going to a film and noticing the screen that the light's being projected onto. It's like you're aware of the screen being there, and it reminds you, oh, this is a movie. Helps you to not get lost in the matrix, as it were. So that it's both usable as a support for insight and support for concentration. One of the books we haven't got available is called Inner Listening, that says exactly what I just said, but in print. There isn't a Thai version yet, but it's there on our website as an English version. So 5 o'clock has come around again, and even though this was all in English, I hoped that people could understand enough. And I realize I do speak quickly and sometimes use long and strange words, but hopefully everything is recorded so that you can go back and revisit what was that? If you need to.